Pliny the Young makes reference to Hannibal's troops settling literally 8 kilometers from our estate and drinking Trebulanum, which obviously was the forefather of Trebbiano, the white grape. And it was well known that the ancient Roman troops would drink white wine predominantly. Pliny goes on to narrate how Montepulciano was actually used by the troops of Hannibal to actually rid of scurvy, the scurvy that the horses had.
Fascinating people with stories to share, fabulous wines and the best local foods to accompany them, and beautiful places to discover and visit. All of this and more on Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Tuesday. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today we travel to Abruzzo, to Loreto Aprutino, to meet my guest, Rodrigo Redmont, who together with his wife, Antonella, oversees their own family wine estate, Tenuta Talamonti, that was established in 2001. Buongiorno, Rodrigo. Many thanks for being our guest today. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thank you for asking. Welcome to and hello to all the guests as well.
I gather it's been an intense morning with your young family.
It certainly has. Italian families tend to be loud and cheerful, but when they're aged 5, 8, and 10, it sort of amplifies.
I bet it does. Well, it's good that they're all cheerful. Now, Rodrigo, Abruzzo is a majestic land of mountain and sea with some of the highest peaks of the Apennini, the Apennines, in proximity to the beautiful Adriatic Sea. You're in the hill country inland from Pescara, an area particularly well suited to growing grapes. For our listeners who are located all around the world, can you describe where you are? Can you take us to Abruzzo, to Loreto Aprutino, and let us feel the sun or maybe the rain today and the wind and feel the soil in your hands? Tell us where you are.
The first characteristic I think to emphasize is, according to ENIT, which is the National Tourism Board, Abruzzo has the greatest biodiversity of Europe. And this is important to emphasize because when people think about Montepulciano Abruzzo or the Abruzzo region in general, there's this sort of obscure, unknown, not very clear view of how diverse it really is. And Abruzzo, within an hour's drive, will take you from the sun-drenched Adriatic coast all the way up to almost 3,000 meters in height to probably Europe's southmost glacier, still for a couple of more years, which is the Gran Sasso. So it is an extremely diverse region where the characteristics of the culture, the food, and the wine are much more diverse than people really perceive. It's an area which is 1/3 covered in national parks. So you have obviously bears, wild boar, you have wolf, obviously you have game, you have maybe 8,000 different species of flora and fauna that dot basically the region. So it's very, very, how can I say, bustling as a region. It's a region filled with water, natural water resources, whether it be the snow or from the spring reservoirs. And because of that, the vegetation sprouts or grows very fast and very wildly. So we're constantly taking, if you want, all the produce to get a haircut, because the issue really is to try and trim it back constantly because everything grows so spontaneously. And that's the Abruzzo region. It's an area which is relatively unknown. And the reason for its lack of how can I say, recognition is because it's always been off the beaten path. The Apennine mountain range surrounds it from the west. Now we are about 2 hours drive east of Rome, and you cross some of the most majestic peaks as you drive through the A24 or the A25, cutting horizontally from Rome until you hit the coast that faces Croatia or Greece. And the region has also been a little bit less recognized because it's obviously an area which is very well known for its numerous earthquakes. And that has obviously, to a certain degree, not promoted tourism to the area because, people, when they hear about a lot of serious earthquakes, whether it be in Amatrice or it be in Aquila, obviously are scared a little bit away. But I think the Abruzzo region is a very agricultural region. There's almost no industrialization, so very good for health. It's an area where people still leave their keys in their doors. So there's a very strong spirit and sense of community. It's a society that really has grown very strongly on a nomadic lifestyle because the main form of sustainment for many families was sheep herdsmen. People are not very familiar with this heritage that we have in Abruzzo, but they might be very familiar with the most famous dish, which is arrosticini. I don't know, Mark, if you've ever tasted arrosticini.
I have indeed, and I look forward to discussing that in more detail. But you're right, this tradition of the transhumanza, this movement of livestock, of sheep up into the high pastures in the summer months, is quite spectacular because it's something that's disappeared almost everywhere else in Europe. Used to happen much more in other countries as well as in the north of Italy, but still very much part of Abruzzo life. Rodrigo, you've described this beautiful biodiverse area of mountain and sea and national parks, and it really is, and the fertility of the area, having to control growth. This biodiverse area, of course, has a history of growing grapes that goes back millennia, even before the time of the Romans, doesn't it?
Indeed, it does. Pliny the Young makes reference to Hannibal's troops settling literally 8 kilometers from our estate and drinking Trebulanum, which obviously was the forefather of Trebbiano, the white grape. And it was well known that the ancient Roman troops would drink white wine predominantly. Pliny goes on to narrate how Montepulciano was actually used by the troops of Hannibal to actually rid of scurvy, the scurvy that the horses had. So there really was a greater appreciation for white wine by these troops. Now, the town of Loreto Aprutino is not only recognized where we are located for grape production. We have some of the legendary Abruzzo producers in Loreto Aprutino, such as our neighbor Valentini. But the area is very well known for its olive oil. I believe it was 66 when the Aprutino Pescarese DOP of olive oil was certified. This is the first olive oil to be certified DOC in Italy. And then we also have a presidium for slow food for the small white round bean called the tondino, the round one. So this biodiversity, which I mentioned earlier on, also applies to all the forms of agriculture that we have here in this region.
That's fascinating. And we'll discuss some of those food products a little later. I know the olive oil is very special. Now, Abruzzo is this ancient wineland where grapes have been grown for thousands of years, but Tenuta Talamonti is a relatively new wine estate. So, can you share with us your personal story, where you're from, how you came to found this exciting venture with your wife, and tell us the story of Tenuta Talamonti?
Sure. I actually a little bit of a international, how can I say, citizen, a global citizen, as I was raised in Rome by American and Portuguese parents who were in the journalism field, went to study in Boston in university, and then returned to Italy to dive into the wine industry with my first stint at Castello Banfi in Montalcino.
What were you doing there, Rodrigo?
I was in charge of European sales there, and it was really at the tipping point for Montalcino because in '96, the 90, the 95, the 97 vintages were just being released and acclaimed. So it was quite an experience. I mean, restaurants would shut in Montalcino at 9 o'clock. Wineries were not able to sell Rosso di Montalcino. So very similar to what we have today here in Abruzzo or in Loreto Aprutino, which is sort of a gentrified neighborhood, if you want. This is an area that produces extraordinary quality, yet still today the market is in the how can I say, in a phase where it's still recognizing from a price perspective that level of quality. Abruzzo has mainly Trebbiano and Montepulciano as its two varietals, but really the grape variety which catapulted Abruzzo, I think, into the spotlight is the Pecorino grape.
Okay, that's fascinating. Because as you say, we think of the Trebbiano Abruzzese as well as the Montepulciano as the principal mainstays of wine in Abruzzo, but Pecorino I know is growing and growing in many parts of Abruzzo. So you decided to begin your own wine estate. Is your wife from Abruzzo? Is this why you have settled in Abruzzo?
She lives in Loreto Aprutino, and she is very strongly radicated in the town of Loreto Aprutino. I was introduced to this beautiful town, and actually to my wife, to one of my former colleagues, Lucio Matricardi, who worked at Banfi making wine, and he brought me to this area, and there were actually a team of people who were planning this investment in this beautiful Rhine region, and he asked me if I wanted to participate in this sort of new adventure. So we're talking 2001. We're talking Twin Towers in New York. We are talking, a first generation experience in the wine industry, adjacent to families who have been farming in the area for 4, 5, 600 years. And it was fairly bold decision, but we saw an enormous potential, both from a historical, but also from a, how can I say, geological, morphological environment. It is a town that has a architecture and a landscape which is extremely impressive. It's almost like a nativity image, one of these classic medieval hamlets that hug a hilltop mountain. It's an area, just to give you an idea of the potential, that has probably the largest underground Neolithic caverns of Europe that are still being excavated.
Oh my, I had no idea.
They have basically, the University of Pisa started excavations 20 years ago. And as you know, in Italy, excavations take a very long time. They have to constantly stop and be inspected and analyzed. So it's taking a little bit. But they have found chambers that are 2.5 meters high, completely underneath the ground, excavated. And so, I mean, it's not like pyramids in Egypt, but it's extremely interesting to see the level of architectural feats that already, thousands and thousands and dozens of thousands of years ago, maybe even in the Bronze Age, they were already performing here in this area.
That's amazing. I was actually interested, as you say, that some of the families in Loreto Aprutino, some of the famous names, have roots in wine that go back many generations and in time as well. But you started with a complete clean slate. So tradition can sometimes be restricting. You didn't have that restriction. What has been your abiding philosophy and goal is as you and your wife embarked on this great adventure?
So I think a spirit of great sustainability and inclusion. So, for example, all our wines are produced exclusively with solar panel or windmill generated energy. Um, we try to respect as much as we can a traditional, almost organic form of farming. However, obviously, if there's a need to intervene in a specific vintage, like 2 years ago when we had a tremendous issue with mildew in all of the Abruzzo region, where some wineries lost even 70, 80, 90% of their production. Then we do intervene, obviously, with some synthesized products. But generally speaking, we try to be as sustainable as possible. We have in the area, together with our neighbors, we have posted 150 bird huts to incentivize, or bird houses to incentivize insect eating bird species. We utilize sexual confusion as far as other forms of deterrence for insects. We do, obviously, between the rows of vineyards, we obviously grow other crops in order to provide nutrients to the soil without having to excessively use any kind of fertilizers. And obviously, our main concern is obviously the health of the soil. As far as the inclusion is concerned, we are the first winery in the world to be certified for gender equality. And this is something that we feel pretty strongly about, as we have two daughters and a son. And we have more than 50% of the staff, which is female. And obviously, my wife plays a fundamental role within the winery and its operations, as we split responsibilities equally. So it's very important for us to try and balance the role of the woman, especially in a field like agriculture, which is very strongly male dominated, and also especially in a region like southern Italy, because Abruzzo is in southern Italy, where the patriarchal approach to many family businesses is still the general rule. So I think, overall, these are the guiding forces.
Okay, that's very interesting, especially about the inclusivity and the gender equality, because as you say, wine, even all across Italy, even in the north, is still very male dominated. But women in wine are making their mark indeed, and indeed in charge of some very famous wine estates too. Let's turn to your wines, Rodrigo. Some of your flagship wines. Can we start with the Trabocchetto Pecorino? And first of all, explain to us the Trabocco.
Oh, absolutely. The coast of Abruzzo is dotted with these wooden constructions that were built in order to permit the fishermen to fish during stormy weather. Obviously, when they couldn't head out on their ships, they would be able to extend with these platforms that are built of wood, and basically throw their nets, cast their nets, and be able to catch much of the fish from the Adriatic coast. So the trabocchi are these wooden constructions. The trabocchetto is the specific fishing net which is utilized. They're different historical references. Some claim there is a Jewish origin to this form of construction, or in any case, that it originates from the Holy Land, or what today is Israel or Palestine, depending obviously on your perspective. But they are very traditional, and today, obviously, there are many restaurants, so they've partially been transformed into some commercial structures. And every time, obviously, we decided to produce a wine, or attempted to produce a wine, we tried to create storytelling in the name, but also in the label itself. And so the name Trabocchetto, which is our Pecorino grape, which is a wonderful grape. It's a semi-aromatic, dry but semi-aromatic grape. Some people compare it to Sauvignon Blanc, but more the French style, obviously, not the New World style. Is a wonderful grape that comes from 4 hectares that were planted in 2009, and we simply stainless steel fermented. We do a little bit of cold maceration, and it's a wonderful white wine, which is served as an aperitif these days, and very much appreciated also by the younger generations.
Okay, so that Pecorino, as you say, this wonderful grape that was rediscovered in the southern Marche by Guido Cocci-Grifoni, is widely planted now in Abruzzo and producing some brilliant examples. So I'm imagining that's a perfect wine to enjoy with that feast of seafood from the Adriatic.
It is. And we have, obviously, we are 20 kilometers from the seaside, and we are maybe about 60 kilometers from the 3,000 meters in height. So there's a lot of temperature excursion between day and night, which is very important for the aromatic characteristics. There's a lot of limestone, and there's a river bend, an ancient river bend that obviously created ideal soil characteristics for the production of aromatic white wine.
Well, let's turn to the white grape that has really given Abruzzo on the map for white wines, which is this particular variety of Trebbiano Abruzzese, to produce your Eternum Trebbiano d'Abruzzo. Tell us about this wine.
Aternum, again, is a reference to the historical name of Pescara, Aternum Vicus, and also to the most important river that flows through the region of Abruzzo, which is the Aterno. The Trebbiano that we produce is a Trebbiano Riserva, and it stems from an old vine. So we're talking 60-year-old vines. We're talking pergola trained vines, which is the traditional training method for the Abruzzo region, where historically you had obviously alberello, which is more common in Puglia, but also pergola, which is actually, with the change in climate, is becoming more and more important for not only white but also red grapes, because obviously it creates shade. There is slower ripening because obviously the density is less intense, and obviously the grapes hang at a higher altitude, and obviously this allows this slower ripening. Trebbiano d'Abruzzo is a very difficult grape to grow and very difficult grape to tackle because it's a very long grape. It ripens not uniformly. Obviously, these grape bunches can sometimes stick together, and so if there is a year like 2023 where there's mildew, it's very, very challenging to try and preserve the quality and the ripeness of the grapes. But it's a grape variety that makes in Loreto Aprutino, and we have plenty of examples, whether it be our neighbors Valentini or De Fermo, Ciavoric, or Amorotti, or Torre dei Beati. These are the six estates that actually form together with us, the five estates that form with us, an association called Custodes Laureti, which is now analyzing the different contrade of Loreto Aprutino to give a little bit more information on this diversity. But the Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, in our case, ages very gracefully for 10, 20, even 25 years, almost Chablis in style, if you allow the comparison. The wine is obviously stainless steel fermented. We do malolactic. We do a lot of yeast stirring, and then we will age it partially for 6 months in neutral large barrels. So it's obviously a wonderful wine, which is very gastronomical, especially with a myriad of different dishes that we have in the region. I'm sure you're familiar with, the wonderful saffron we have in the region, or the wonderful different pasta dishes that we have here in the region that are always paired with legumes or vegetables that would pair beautifully with a creamy white wine.
Okay, that's a very important description, Rodrigo, and I want our listeners to understand that Trebbiano d'Abruzzo has the capacity, in the right hands and when the grape is grown well, to produce one of the greatest white wines in Italy. A wine with terrific character, concentration, structure, and acidity that allows it to evolve for decades. I mean, we don't really think of Italian whites normally is capable of evolving in quite this capacity, but Trebbiano d'Abruzzo can certainly be one of the great white wines of Italy. Rodrigo, let's now turn to your Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, your Tre Saggi.
I just want to emphasize one other aspect, which maybe the listeners may not be aware of. But Italy is predominantly a white wine producing country. Many people associate Italy exclusively with predominantly red wines, but in fact, some of the greatest plantings that we have and wine quantity that we produce is actually white wine. So the DNA of Italy is very strongly connected to Italian wine. And this is the reason why I appreciate the great description you have provided to our Trebbiano d'Abruzzo. But Montepulciano d'Abruzzo is a grape variety which sometimes causes some confusion. It's a very versatile grape variety. It produces Italy's first DOC classified rosé, Cerasuolo, which is an incredible rosé wine, very dark colored, even with just a few hours of skin contact. But it's a grape variety where the confusion stems from the fact that in Italy, we have a town in Tuscany called Montepulciano, and we then have a grape variety called Montepulciano. Not many people are aware of the strong connection that Abruzzo historically has always had with Tuscany. And everybody is aware that many centuries ago, the Grand Duchy of Tuscany was the scientific, the cultural hub of Europe. And so when the Medici purchased a very large estate in the mountains of the Abruzzo region, probably to raise their sheep in order to produce their wool, in order to trade it with the northern part of Europe, as is one of the theories. Probably there was some form of interaction with locals, and possibly a grape variety may have accidentally traveled to the Abruzzo region. This is the history of the Montepulciano grape. At least this is one of the theories. The second theory is that Montepulciano, Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, was reputed in all the noble courts to be of very high quality. And so the term Montepulciano was not only reference to the origin of the grape, but actually to a quality level, the Montepulciano quality level grape. And that might be the second reason or the second theory for the grape variety to be called in that way. But Montepulciano is a very thick-skinned grape variety. The two characteristics that Montepulciano always has is color intensity and tannins, ripe, elegant tannins. And the Trissaggi that we produce, again, stem from a pergola trained single vineyard of 4 hectares, always a 60-year-old single vineyard. And the wine is then aged in 350 liter or 300 liter French oak barrels. And we try stylistically to express a more elegant styled Montepulciano. We're not looking for structure, which is more typical from the coast where the alcohol levels are higher. We try really to give more freshness and more elegance to the wine. This is really our main objective. And the name Trissaggi obviously stems from another important landmark of the area, which is the Church of Santa Maria in Piano in Loreto Aprutino, which is adjacent to our vineyards, where a Judgment Day fresco depicts the three wise men or the three patriarchs. And so, again, it's a connection to our identity or to the town where we are located.
Okay, and again, that link between wine and culture, both regional but also very local culture, that connection is vital, isn't it?
Absolutely. We are very strongly orienting ourselves to try and connect ourselves to the village and the origin of our family members, especially on my wife's side. And as far as hospitality, we've obviously invested in starting the renovation program of a historical building in the old town that hopefully will house a historical cellar, a wine bar, some luxury rooms, and obviously a restaurant. This is the long term objective that we have, as obviously eno-tourism is becoming more and more important for obviously the equity, but also the promotion of a land.
Yes, absolutely. You've touched on some of the foods, and we're running out of time here. But I just want you to mention one of my favorite things to eat in Abruzzo, which is the arrosticini. That you've already mentioned, this wonderful lamb dish. Is this something that you would cook yourself in your backyard when you're having friends and family around?
I would say that arrosticini for someone of Abruzzo is almost like popcorn for an American. It is the most appreciated form of snack or entertainment. We have 6 butchers in a town of 3,000 people.
My, that's incredible.
So, yes, arrosticini are lamb skewers that are barbecued and that are, consumed obviously by, I would say, maybe 30 or 50 at a time at a meal.
quite small cubes cooked on these long skewers. And the meat itself, Rodrigo, it's not just one cut of lamb, it's a variety, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's different cuts. The seasoning is very important. The source of the mutton or the lamb is very important. Whether they are hand cut or they are mechanically cut impacts, and obviously the cooking impacts. So you may be having a meal at a restaurant, and the batches may actually taste different because obviously the cut of the meat changes as the cubes roll out. So it's very, very interesting.
Okay, that's fascinating. And of those six butchers, do you go to one and one only, your favorite butcher, or do you try to frequent more than one?
I think the sourcing of food is 0 kilometer farm to table is something which is very religiously followed in the Abruzzo region. So we don't go to the butcher; we go directly to the farm that raises the animals. We take it one step further.
Great, great. Now, you mentioned this wonderful project for wine hospitality, and I think you've made our listeners certainly want to visit Loreto Aprutino, which must be one of the great small wine towns of the world that is yet to be discovered. And so I'm looking forward to the completion of that project. But in the meantime, if people make their way to Loreto Aprutino, can they visit you?
Yeah, so the best way to come to Loreto Aprutino is either through Rome or Pescara Airport and rent a car. And we absolutely have tours. We're actually looking to develop them and offer a little bit richer experiences, such as picnics in the vineyards or maybe some other events in the framework of the location we are in. The stone construction, the historical building, will be probably completed in a couple of years. So in the meantime, we absolutely have these great food and gastronomical experiences at the winery that requires simply a reservation ahead of schedule.
Well, that sounds fabulous, and I certainly look forward to visiting myself one day. And I hope our listeners will be taking note and making their way as well to, as you said, very much an undiscovered part of Italy, a beautiful part of Italy. Rodrigo, thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been fascinating and really enjoyable meeting you, talking to you, learning about your area, but also about your own approach to creating a winery, creating it with your own ideas and intentions. And I wish you all the best. I look forward to meeting one day soon.
Thank you, Mark. Likewise.
Great. Have a great day. Grazie. Buona giornata.
Thank you. Ciao. A presto. Grazie, Mark.
We hope today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast has transported you to somewhere special. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at italianwinepodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.